Hello, welcome to Microfiche Microphone. I'm Micah, and on this channel we look at microfiche from the past, old newspaper articles in the public domain. We look at them with our modern eyes, our modern perspective, and see what we can learn from them. On this microfiche time capsule, we are looking back at the improvement era from April 1956. And this article is entitled Ezra Taft Benson, A Living Witness for Christ, by Merlo J. Pusey, Associate Editor of the Washington Post. The little asterisk leads us to, for a biographical sketch, see page 288. I'm not interested in a biographical sketch of the author at the moment, so sorry about that, but maybe someday. But at the moment, we are looking at Ezra Taft Benson. So what do I know about Ezra Taft Benson? I think most people know some things about him. First of all, he was a president of the church, yes. And another thing that most people, I feel, know about him is that he served in the government. He was, let's see if I can get this right, he was the Secretary of Agriculture in the presidency of Dwight D. Eisenhower, I believe. I'm fairly certain that's right. So, him being very politically active, I feel that he spoke about politics more than most of the other apostles and presidents of the church. And as such, he made himself not universally liked. Let's put it that way. I struggle a little bit because I do not agree with this man's politics, but that doesn't necessarily mean that I don't admire him as a person. Yeah, I feel like I can separate that in my head, and I hope that you can too. This is, however, a relatively long article, and hopefully it's pretty complete, except for, President of the Church, which happened after this. But I thought that we could take a look at it today, and hopefully it's not quite as long of a video as Spencer W. Kimball. Sorry, that one got really, really long, but I was just enjoying myself way too much. But let's see what this is about, because this article is fairly long. So, so let's jump in. This is the first photo. This was the cover of the magazine, and it is a portrait of Ezra Taft Benson. I don't know, how old do you think he was here? Maybe 50-ish? Maybe 60s? I don't know. But yeah. So, moving on, I think we all know what he looked like. I think his more famous portrait is when he was older, but that was when he was president of the church, so makes sense. Anyway, but here's a couple pictures in the article on that first page. This is Elder Ezra Taft Benson and Sister Benson at the inauguration of President Dwight D. Eisenhower in Washington, D.C., January 20th, 1953. Yeah. Maybe that's what sparked this article in 1956, because he was still working in the White House, was he not? Also, I forgot to mention, Ezra Taft Benson was named after his great-grandfather, I believe it was, Ezra T. Benson. So it's confusing because they literally had the same name. Ezra T. Benson, as we call him, was a member of the Quorum of the 12, but he was never president of the church. Ezra Taft Benson, the grandson, which is why we always write out his middle name Taft, because they had literally the same name. Yeah? He did become president of the church. So, just to keep those separate in your mind. I don't think I've made a video on Ezra T. Benson yet, but I will. That is on my list of things to do. So, let's take a look. Here's a couple more pictures. George Taft Benson, father of Ezra Taft Benson. Sarah Dunkley Benson, mother of Brother Benson. Yeah? And this is Ezra Taft Benson at 3 months of age. He's such a cute baby. Oh my gosh. Yeah, babies are cute. What can you say? All right. Ezra Taft Benson, A Living Witness for Christ. by Merlo J. Pusey, associate editor of the Washington Post. All America and the free world knows Ezra Taft Benson as Secretary of Agriculture. It's interesting that they say the free world. The whole free world knows who this man is. Exaggeration, just a touch. Latter-day Saints know him more intimately as the fourth-ranking member of the Council of the 12. 1956, maybe. Sometime before the first meeting of the Eisenhower Cabinet on January 12, 1953, in New York City, the president-elect chatted with Elder Benson and spoke of his interest in the spiritual welfare of the country. This gave the Secretary-designate an opportunity to express his views of the great need for the guidance of God in their deliberations and to suggest that it would be appropriate to open their meeting with prayer. The president, a man of deep spirituality, evidently concurred. Nothing more was said on the subject until later at the first cabinet meeting. All the introductions had been made, and everyone had found his place around the luncheon table. Then the president-elect paused a moment, his beaming smile giving way to seriousness. Because of the great need of the incoming administration for divine inspiration, he said, he was asking the Secretary of Agriculture to open this first meeting of the new cabinet with prayer. Elder Benson was taken completely by surprise, yet in a general sense he was well prepared for this unusual assignment. Spontaneous prayer was a deeply ingrained habit. With mingled humility and confidence in the rightness of his course, he prayed fervently, thanking God for freedom, for our inspired Constitution, for the principles guiding our way of life, and for the bounty of the land. Then he uttered an earnest petition for divine guidance, for the spirit of discernment, for unity and dedication to the welfare of the people and to the holy purposes of God. It was an impressive and inspirational prayer. Well, okay, so if you were asked to give a prayer, so basically what he said was, in the cabinet meetings we should start with a prayer, and he suggested it, and he was then surprised when they called on him to give the first prayer. I don't think that that's surprising. It was your suggestion, dude. Do you not want to pray? You were the one who wanted to pray, so here's your opportunity, It's so silly. It is kind of cool that they asked him to pray first, and I think that most people who are very active in the church wouldn't have a problem spontaneously praying. So, I think that even in front of the cabinet, in front of Congress, it would be something that you would be willing to do. I would personally, so anyway. There's a few pictures. This is Sister Benson with some of the children, including the eldest and tallest, T, as young Ezra was affectionately called. T. Okay. You called your child by letter? I don't know that I would ever do that, but okay. Ezra Taft Benson with his father, T, stands at the left back. Okay. I wouldn't have recognized him. These are very grainy pictures. Okay, here's one that's slightly less grainy here. Elder Benson is president of the Newcastle Conference, England, right seated, with a group of missionaries in 1922, with President and Sister McKay, who were presiding over the European mission. I was going to say, that's David O. McKay, is it not? But yeah, if he's sitting on the right, okay. So, okay, I wouldn't have recognized him from that. I really wouldn't have. Would you have? I recognized David O. McKay in that picture, but I did not recognize Ezra Taft Benson. That's interesting. I don't know. I wouldn't have seen him in that picture, but moving on. 8 days later, the president himself uttered a simple and direct prayer as a preliminary to his inaugural address. At the second meeting in Washington, the practice of opening each cabinet meeting with prayer was agreed upon as routine procedure. Occasionally, it is vocal, as at the first meeting in New York, but usually it is silent. Okay, so they're like, okay, let's all pray together. And then everybody says their own. The members of the cabinet bow their heads and each silently address deity in his own way. Secretary Benson also opens his own staff meetings at the Department of Agriculture with prayer. Yeah, shocking. Some of his associates in the department were rather shocked to be called upon to pray, but they became accustomed to it. They have come to appreciate the Secretary's deep sincerity and to respect his conviction that no important decisions should be made without an appeal to God for his assistance. Okay. Elder Benson inherited a rich legacy of faith. The Ezra Taft Benson, for whom he was named, his great-grandfather, was the first apostle selected by Brigham Young after the death of the prophet. That devoted churchman, who preached with power, endured cruel persecution, served as a member of the Nauvoo Legion, accompanied President Young and the first company of Mormon pioneers on the perilous journey across the plains to Salt Lake Valley in 1847. George T. Benson, the Secretary's grandfather for 23 years, Bishop of the Whitney Ward, Idaho, was born in a covered wagon in Iowa during the journey. Okay. Later, he and his wife, Louisa Bailiff Benson, parents of 13 children, became pioneers in the settlement of a portion of Cache Valley in southern Idaho. There, in the little community of Whitney, George T. Benson Jr. and Sarah Dunkley Benson, one of the family of 13, were living in a two-room house on a 40-acre livestock sugar beet, grain, and potato farm when their eldest son, Ezra Taft, was born on August 4th, 1899. Those are very long sentences. I don't feel like I even was able to take a breath there, but here we go. Now, normally I kind of get annoyed when they talk too much about, like, legacy and ancestry, but in this case it is relevant, because that is basically how his family came to be where he was born. Yeah, in Cache Valley, is that what they said? In southern Idaho, okay? And that his great-grandfather was his namesake, yeah? Ezra T. Benson. Well, I guess technically Ezra Taft Benson was the namesake of Ezra T., yeah? I think it's a little strange that they called him T, but, okay, why not call him Ezra? But whatever floats your boat, I guess. The attending doctor despaired of his life and that of his mother. Oh, really? In administering to them, his father and the attending doctor invoked God's healing power upon the infant. As the eldest great-great-grandson, the name of the distinguished pioneer apostle was confirmed upon him. What? He's not great-great, is he? I thought it was just great. Now I'm annoyed. Okay. Young Ezra grew up with a strong conviction that this exercise of faith had saved his life. Okay, well, it might have. I don't know what was wrong with him when he was born, why he was not thriving when he first drew breath. All right, let's take a look at some of the pictures. This is Elder Benson as county agent in Preston, Idaho, 1929. I don't know much about horses, okay? But is it just me, or is that a very tall horse? Like, I imagine trying to, like, get up on it, and it just seems very intimidating. Alright, here is Elder Benson and Brother Zimmer. I mean, that's the German pronunciation, I guess, Zimmer? Checking church supplies stored in Geneva, Switzerland for distribution to saints in war-torn Europe. Okay, it's probably Zimmer. Alright, I take it back. Okay, for 10 months, while Brother Benson was European Mission President, Sister Benson held the family together in work and play. Huh. She didn't go with him? That's interesting. A home evening at the Bensons reading scriptures. Okay, so they had a decent number of kids. What is that, 7? 8? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I count 7, but one of them might be the mother. I can't, it's not clear enough to tell how old these people are. But there is a candidate for possible being the mother in that picture. So, maybe 6. 6 or 7. Something like that. I'm sure we will find out. But, yeah. But it seems very family-oriented, yeah? At least the mother was. I don't know if he was very much. Alright. From his earliest childhood, he was taught to pray and to rely upon prayer to overcome every difficulty. His father, who served in the bishopric and the stake presidency, used to say to him, "Remember, whatever you do or wherever you are never alone. Our Heavenly Father is always near. You can reach out and receive His aid through prayer." Gratefully, Elder Benson acknowledges the priceless blessing of being reared in a home frequently referred to as an ideal Mormon home. There was ever present a spirit of love, unselfish cooperation, and dedication to the principles of the gospel, with full activity in the church, says Elder Benson. In fact, I cannot remember ever hearing a cross word between the faithful father and queenly mother in that haven of peace, he added. Ezra learned early in youth the virtue of hard work. At the age of 4, he could drive a team. He was soon herding cattle, thinning beets, milking cows, and doing general farm work. The Benson family grew, Ezra being the eldest of 11 children. That's a big family. And so did the family home and the farm acreage. In addition to cultivating beets and potatoes, the Bensons kept 15 Holstein cows and about 250 chickens, and a few hogs. On their new acreage in the foothills, they raised wheat. Ezra, or T, as the family called him, met the first big test at the age of 14. His father was to go on a mission. To make the mission possible, they sold half the farm and shared their home with the family that operated part of the remaining acres. Okay, and that's one solution. The pasture dairy section of the farm was retained for Ezra and his brothers to manage. Stark economic necessity thus drove them to extraordinary efforts. Ezra's noble mother carried courageously the responsibility of 8 children, the last of which was born 4 months after her husband had left for his mission. Jeez. Later, her eldest son said, recalling those 2 years, "Never did I hear a murmur from her lips." Well, that is quite admirable, at least. Wow. All right, let's look at the pictures. The Ezra Taft Benson family enjoy horseback riding in Virginia in 1954 on brief vacation. Their vacation was to go horseback riding, or did they not get enough of that at home? I'm just saying. Sister Ezra Taft Benson with the first grandchild, Stephen Reed, the son of Mark A. Benson and his wife, Leila? All right, here we go. The Benson family today. Okay, today as in April 1956. Left to right, bottom row, Ezra Taft Benson, Stephen Reed Benson, Leila Wing, Mrs. Mark Benson, Stephanie granddaughter Benson, Flora Amundsen Benson, and Flora Beth Benson. Back row, Dr. Robert Harris Walker, Barbara Benson Walker, Mark A. Benson, Bonnie A. Benson, Reed Benson, and Beverly A. Benson. Okay, so they're mostly teenagers and young adults, yes? Like, it seems like some of them are not quite adults yet. And also one of them is still a child, prepubescent. That is the little girl on the far right. What was her name again? Flora Beth. Yeah, is the youngest. So I still don't know exactly how many kids they had. At least one of them is married, the mother. And the wife is there with the 2 grandchildren, yes? Anyways, I'm sure we will find out more particulars. But that's a family portrait, and that's very lovely. Okay. It was a period of real hardship for the Bensons, but toil and pinching to make ends meet did not seem like hardships when they contributed to the cause to which all members of the family gave their primary devotion. At the age of 16, Ezra proved his unusual capacity for work by thinning an entire acre of beets in a day, from sunup to sundown. Now, I have no concept of how long that usually takes. So, I really couldn't say anything about that. But I am assuming that it usually takes more time than a day. Okay. The surprised neighbor for whom he did the work gave him 2 $5 gold pieces and 2 silver dollars. Nice. Never before or since has he felt as wealthy as he did that night. Nor did his premature responsibilities blight his youthful zest. Within the family and school, T was a tease and a perpetrator of practical jokes. Okay, that is a huge turnoff for me. I hate practical jokes, so hopefully it's not too bad. Somehow, despite the demands of school and the farm, he also found time to trap muskrats to help meet expenses, to round up cattle in the nearby mountains, and indulge in his love of basketball, baseball, and other sports. Starting school at 8, he early decided that he wanted to study agriculture. He attended the Oneida Stake Academy, traveling each day from the farm at Preston, Idaho, by horseback or by buggy or sleigh. In the winter of 1918, he began spending in intermittent quarters, whenever farm work would permit, at the Utah State Agricultural College in Logan, Utah. Okay. At Logan, he found something more than new ways of cultivating the soil and increasing milk production. In the fall of 1920, he visited the college preliminary to registration. As he stood on the curb of Main Street in Logan with his cousin, Serge Bailiff. They're cousins? I'm sorry. That's okay. An attractive girl drove by and waved at Serge. Okay. Serge Bailiff was, I believe, mission president at some point, and he used to speak in General Conference. I mean, he spoke in General Conference at least a good handful of times. I'm wondering if that was like the influence of his cousin, of Ezra Taft Benson, or if there was like some other connection there. I did not know that they were related. That's interesting. Now, Serge Bailiff I have heard of. And so that's an interesting one to just pop up out of nowhere. But he spoke in conference a few times. Let me look it up real quick to see exactly when that was. Yeah, he spoke the first time as mission president of the Swiss-German mission in 1909. And he sometimes spoke in the capacity of stake president of the Cache Valley Stake. So he spoke in April 1909, as well as October 1913, October 1915, April 1917, April 1920, October 1920, October 1923, and October 1925. It sounds to me that he was older than Ezra T. Yes, Ezra Taft Benson, because there's no way he would have otherwise spoken, unless this Serge Bailiff was the son of the one who spoke in 1909. But I think that that's the same person, maybe, question mark, I don't know, maybe. So, but that's interesting to me that they were related. I had no idea. All right. So an attractive girl drove by and waved at Serge. Who is that girl? Ezra asked. Why, that's Flora Amundsen, Serge replied. If I come down here this winter, Ezra asserted with a tone of determination in his voice, I'm going to step her. The dickens you will, his cousin shot back. She's too popular for you. That makes it all the more interesting, the confident young farmer replied. A few weeks later, he was surprised and happy to see the same girl in his own Whitney Ward Sunday school. She was spending the weekend with a friend. This time he had a chance to meet her when his uncle asked him to take the girls for a drive. Ezra came back deeply impressed by her sweet personality, high standards, deep spirituality, good common sense, and deep appreciation for the slightest favor. His resolution to get better acquainted with her was firmed into a major purpose. Flora, who had never heard of this farm boy, little realized he was to be her future husband. Okay. Well, that's kind of cute, the way they met, yeah? I mean, he was a young person, and she was a young person. They were probably same age-ish. That's cute. Okay. There's a few pictures. President Eisenhower being shown a purebred Holstein from the dairy experiment station at Beltsville Research Center during the president's visit there in May 1953 by Secretary of Agriculture Ezra Taft Benson. Yeah. Elder Benson being congratulated by members of the Scout Council upon receiving the Silver Antelope Regional Award. Okay, that's cool. Alright, let's see. Elder Benson with other U.S. delegates to the International Federation of Agricultural Producers Organization meeting, London, England, in June 1946. Sister Benson was honored by National Home Fashion League, October 26, 1955, as the Outstanding American Homemaker. Cool. While he was attending the USAC that winter and living at his grandma Benson's home, he found the courage to ask Flora for a first date. His audacity was borne in upon him as he approached the large 3-story Amundsen home that night in his blue serge suit, shiny in the back, and reflected that he was calling on a girl who owned a car, who lived in a home of culture and refinement, and was said to be the most popular girl in town. Flora was most gracious, and her mother quickly put the young farmer at ease by talking about farming and his family. As the young people left, Flora kissed her mother tenderly, and Ezra knew in his heart that he had made a great find. Flora was the youngest daughter of Carl C. Amundsen, a cultured, well-educated native of Denmark who had made a fortune as a jeweler and watchmaker in connection with the 1848 gold rush in Australia. I didn't know there was a gold rush in Australia in 1848. I mean, you know, like the 49ers, the 1849 California gold rush. That's interesting. I didn't know that. Did you know that? He had joined the church in Liverpool and migrated to Utah, crossing the plains in 1865. He established a jewelry business in Salt Lake City, erected a business building at 60 South Main Street, a structure still in use. Well, in 1956, I don't know if it's still there. Later, he built business houses. Continued on page 266. All right, in Logan, provided fine homes for his three families, traveled twice around the world, filled 4 missions for the church, and assembled one of the best libraries and collection of oil paintings in Utah. Okay, 3 families. Okay, so he was a polygamist, yeah? 1865. Okay, yeah, maybe. Flora's mother, Barbara Smith Amundsen, was 42 years younger than her husband. Wow. Gosh, I cannot fathom that much of an age gap. I'm sorry. That's just, wow. Because I personally don't like really almost any age gap in relationships that I have. So, like, plus or minus 5 years is like my limit. I can't imagine having that big of an age gap. I know not everybody feels the same way, but still. Born in Tooele, Utah, of Scottish pioneer parents, she is described by those who knew her as a noble and angelic soul, a woman without guile. Her husband died at the age of 77, when their youngest daughter, Flora, was only a year old. Can you imagine? Your father dies at age 77 when you are 1. Like, my parents aren't even 77 yet. Like, that's crazy. Sister Amundsen reared her family of 6 as a widow with tenderness and unusual understanding. The intimate and loving relationship between herself and Flora explains in considerable measure the ideal home life that is found today in the Benson home. Okay, well, that explains why she was so close to her mother. She was the youngest child of, 5 children? And her mother was the only parent she ever had. She didn't remember her father at all. So, no, I'm not really surprised. Ezra found the competition keen for, in addition to her background and winsome personality, Flora Amundsen was a tennis star on the campus, president of the Girls Athletic Club, a prize-winning student actress, vice president of the USAC student body, chairman of the junior prom committee, and a leader in many other activities. Yeah, it sounds like she's very busy. But Ezra pressed his courtship with tact and determination. Doubtless, he was aided by the great confidence Flora's mother came to place in him. In 1921, this inspirational and soul-satisfying courtship, as he once described it, was interrupted by a mission to Great Britain. Oh, interesting. So he went on his mission before they had really become a couple. Okay. For 2 years, Ezra preached the gospel ardently. In Newcastle, where he became president of the conference, he dressed in plain clothes of a workman while preaching to the unemployed on the streets. Oh, he's just trying to connect with the people he's trying to reach, yeah? Know your audience. The affection he won is indicated by recent reports from Newcastle that people still refer to him as our Benson. That's sweet. Not all of those who heard him were favorably impressed, however. On one occasion, he and his missionary companion barely escaped a mobbing. That does not sound fun. Throughout his 2.5 years in England, he corresponded with Flora Amundsen. On his return, he was eager to get married and settle down on the farm where he intended to spend his life. Flora consented on both points, but her idea of the timing of these events was rather different from his. Okay, so she wants a long engagement then? She had come to see in Ezra Taft Benson all the qualities she admired. She was attracted by his clean and honest living, his wholesome manner, his sincere faith, his hard work, his desire to learn and to help his fellow men, and his determination to move ahead in the world. She was convinced that he would make an ideal husband, but he had not yet finished his education. Wow, priorities, you know. With remarkable resolution for a young woman of 22, she talked quietly with her bishop, expressing her desire to go on a mission, hoping that in the meantime T would finish college. That is so cool! She believed that his college degree and her mission would better prepare both of them temporally and spiritually for future responsibilities. Good for her. She realized that he might decide not to wait 2 years, that he might change his mind, but she went ahead anyway. If their love would not stand this test, perhaps they were not meant for each other. She spent 20 months doing missionary work in Hawaii. Good for her. I love that story. I would say I admire her like a lot. That's really admirable for the times. I mean, in the 20s? Seriously? That's crazy. Again, letters were exchanged, and Flora felt that her prayers had been answered when he wrote her that he had obtained his degree with honors from Brigham Young University and accepted a scholarship to Iowa State College. Good for them. Incidentally, he had also been designated the most popular man at BYU. That's surprising for a farmer. Yeah, they tend to be a touch more introverted since they're from the country, but I guess, that's more personality than upbringing. In reply to one of his letters, Flora said that she would be happy to go with him to Ames and live on the $70 a month his scholarship provided. They were married in the Salt Lake Temple on September 10th, 1926, and left the same day for Ames, carrying all their possessions in a second-hand Ford pickup truck and camping out at night under a leaky tent. Hang on, let me look really quick. How much is $70 today? Yeah? So let's see, inflation calculator. $1,250.61. Okay, that is not very much to live off of. Hang on, was that a week or was that a month? Because if that's a month, then that's very little. $70 a month, yeah. So like $12.50 a month. Yeah, that's pretty low, not gonna lie. You could scrape by on that, but she's probably going to have to work as well. But, she's also educated. Sure she could find a job. On her marriage, Flora gave most of her share of the inheritance from her father to her mother, who had suffered financial reverses, and to a missionary fund to be used later for her sons. Wow! Oh, yeah, because her father was wealthy, so she came to the marriage with money, and she gave it to her mother to support her mother. That's really sweet. I love that. I really admire Flora Benson. She's amazing. Okay, at Ames, the young couple supplemented their meager income with vegetables from the experimental farm. Yeah, they had to do something to make ends meet. At the end of the school year, Ezra had received a master's degree and had been elected to Gamma Sigma Delta, the Honorary Society of Agriculture. Never heard of it. And Flora had taken special classes in home economics. Cool. See, she's not idle. She's a worker, too. In the spring of 1927, a period of agricultural depression, despite the booming prosperity of the nation as a whole, they moved to the farm in southern Idaho. Okay. Ezra and his brother Orville had purchased the family farm in 1923, when values were still inflated, and they had a struggle to keep up the payments. Nevertheless, they loved farming as a way of life. Okay, so they wanted to just go back to farming after getting a master's degree. That's interesting. That's unusual, yeah? Flora adjusted quickly to her new environment. Her chief interest in life was to support her husband in his work and his church activities, to make a happy home and to rear a family of fine children. She learned to manage the household on a meager allowance, to cook for the threshers, and to meet every problem or emergency with calm assurance that everything would work out for the best. Ezra and his brother were still in partnership when Orville was called on a mission in the fall of 1927, the farm income financing the mission. After Ezra had been on the farm only a year and a half, however, his neighbors found him so useful that the county commissioners literally drafted him to serve as county agricultural agent. That's how he got involved in politics. Okay, yeah. It was agreed he would continue to operate the farm, but this Ezra thought unfair, and the new job was so demanding that he moved to the county seat and gave his whole time to it. Okay. So he had to kind of give up his own farm, yeah? Later, when the farm partnership was dissolved, he found himself in debt because of depressed farm prices and the cost of his education. This took years for the young couple to pay. That's not surprising. As county agent, young Benson helped his neighbors improve their stock, to rotate their crops, to kill off the crop-destroying rodents, and to organize cooperatives. Under the stimulus he supplied, the 4-H clubs of the area multiplied their membership more than 5-fold. So successful were his efforts that in 2 years he was summoned to Boise, an extension economist and marketing specialist at the University of Idaho's College of Agriculture. Hang on, wait a second. I don't understand that sentence. So successful were his efforts that in 2 years he was summoned to Boise as, okay, so they asked him to fulfill this role, as extension economist and marketing specialist at the University of Idaho's College of Agriculture. Well, he does have a master's degree. You can technically teach at university level with a master's degree as long as you're working on your PhD, I believe, is the requirement, but that's today. I don't know if that was the case in, what was this, the late 20s. Out of this work came a conviction that farmers could save money, improve their marketing, and greatly advance their welfare through cooperatives. This belief became the central theme of Ezra Taft Benson's thinking about agriculture. Okay? At Boise, he helped to organize the Idaho Cooperative Council and became its secretary in 1933. One of the campaigns for which he was largely responsible made the Idaho potato famous throughout the land. Really? He was responsible for that? I didn't know that. In the 5 years that he held this post, the Idaho Cooperative Council became one of the most alert and progressive organizations of its kind in the country. Not satisfied with his own qualifications, Ezra Benson took time out for graduate work at the University of California in Berkeley. Did he get his PhD? Even in his busier years, he worked in both ward and stake Sunday school organizations and in the Young Men's Mutual Improvement Association. Warming young people to the church was his hobby. Okay. As scoutmaster in the Whitney Ward, he built up a troop that is still remembered for its exploits and the influence it exerted on the lives of its members. A chorus composed of 24 scouts directed by a future apostle won a stake-wide contest and went on to compete successfully with 6 Cache Valley choruses in the Logan Tabernacle. To this day, Elder Benson has continued his interest in scouting and is a member of the National Executive Board of the Boy Scouts of America. In 1955, he was awarded... Okay, they jumped huge amounts of time there. In 1955, he was awarded the honor most appreciated by Scouters the world over, the Silver Buffalo. It was a great thrill to him when his sons Reed and Mark became Eagle Scouts. Okay. You didn't need to jump to the end there, but okay. In 1932, Elder Benson became superintendent of the YMMIA in Boise Stake. Okay, so Stake Young Men's President, yes? 3 years later, first counselor in the stake presidency, okay? And in 1938, while still in his 30s, president of the Boise Stake. So he was a stake president. That makes sense. Bringing to the stake the same energy, devotion, and organizing ability that he gave to the Cooperative Council, he won the attention of the church authorities in Salt Lake City. At the age of 39, he was asked to go to Washington for consultation with the heads of National Council of Farmers Cooperatives, which speaks for 2.5 million farmers and 5,000 co-ops throughout the nation. After looking him over and questioning him, the Board of Trustees offered him the position of Executive Secretary of that organization, a direct tribute to the work he had done in Idaho. Though he was thrilled by this unsolicited bid for his services, he did not wish to accept it. Oh, why not? Executive Secretary of the Council of Farmer Cooperatives, yeah? Though he was thrilled by this unsolicited bid for his services, he did not wish to accept it. As he understood it, the job would entail lobbying by the use of cocktail parties, which would not be compatible with his religion. Oh. He thought that they would force him to drink alcohol? Like, because you can go to a cocktail party without drinking alcohol, can't you? I mean, correct me if I'm wrong. I mean, I've never been to one, so I guess I couldn't really talk, but I don't know. Mr. Benson, Judge John D. Miller, head of the group, replied, "That is why we selected you. We know what your standards are." With full assurance from the board that he would not be expected to seek an understanding of agricultural problems over cocktail glasses, he was delighted to accept the position, but only after consultation with the First Presidency and his wife. Washington broadened his view of agriculture on national proportions. Soon he was speaking as authoritatively and convincingly of national farm problems as he had previously spoken of Idaho and intermountain farm problems. In the 5 happy, profitable, never-to-be-forgotten years, he won the confidence not only of the great farm organizations, but also of legislators, government officials, and business leaders. Okay. In 1943, a large regional co-op offered to multiply his salary by more than 3, a figure that shocked him. Yeah, imagine getting triple your normal salary. Elder Benson waited until he could discuss it with the Brethren in Salt Lake. For 3 years, he had been the first president of the Washington, D.C. stake, and the new job would take him away from the capital. Oh, okay. He was the first president of the D.C. stake. Interesting. It must not have been a stake before that, part of the, Eastern States Mission or something like that. On his trip to the West, he visited Charles C. Teague, president of the National Council of Farmer Cooperatives, at his home in Santa Paula, California. As they left, Mr. Teague said, "We know you've had opportunities to go elsewhere, but we want you to stay with the NCFC. All you need to do is name your figure." Really? Holy cow! Can you imagine? Somebody's like, just name your price and we'll pay it. That's a huge offer. Elder Benson replied that he did not wish to leave the work he was doing. "I love the cooperative movement," he said. "I believe in it. It squares with my philosophy of life, my religious philosophy." He promised to let Mr. Teague know when he reached a decision. In Salt Lake City, he hoped to get the advice of President David O. McKay of the First Presidency. When he telephoned to President McKay on July 26, 1943, the latter said that President Heber J. Grant wished to see him. Sister Grant welcomed them and said that President was waiting in the bedroom. Still weak from his illness, he was lying down. As Elder Benson approached the bed, President Grant took his right hand in both of his and seemed to look into the depths of his soul. "Brother Benson," he said, "with all my heart I congratulate you and pray God's blessings to attend you. You have been chosen as the youngest apostle of the church." Just when he was trying to decide what he should do, like it was at that moment, he was like, hey, should I stay in D.C. and stay stake president and keep doing what I was doing, which I absolutely love? Or should I take this other job, which they basically are allowing me to name my salary price, which would also be a good job, but I really like the one I'm doing, yeah? What should I do? And now it's like, well, you should do neither of them. You are going to be an apostle. Like, that's crazy. Can you imagine? Oh, that's just so crazy to me. Taken completely by surprise, yeah, I'll bet he was, Ezra Taft Benson felt as if the earth beneath him were sinking. Many times he had felt a longing to spend his full time in church work, but he had not dreamed of high office in the church, although it was learned later that his mother-in-law, who passed on before his calling, had premonitions of his appointment. He put aside thoughts on the new job that he had come to discuss with the brethren. So he's like, well, now it's irrelevant. I don't have anything to talk about now. The Bensons were, for the first time in their married lives, out of debt, having just completed the payments on their home. This represented all of their material accumulation since their marriage, with no opportunity for any savings to be put aside. I didn't know they had no savings. Well, were in debt, yeah, so they did work themselves out of it, so good for them. The children all agreed they must work to put themselves through college. This was no new experience for the Bensons and their families. They would continue working hard as they had always done. Elder Benson was sustained in his new position by the priesthood leadership and membership of the church at the October conference in 1943. Why is there an asterisk? It says, this is one of the limited general conferences held by the church during World War II. Only the priesthood leadership of the church were invited to attend. Within 3 months, however, Elder Benson had been sustained in his new calling at the quarterly stake conferences. Okay. I didn't realize that they limited the people coming to conference. Interesting. I wonder why. Well, you know why, but like, but why, you know? Like, if they're going to have it anyway, is they did have conference during World War II. They held conference. General conferences were held during World War II. I don't think they missed a single one. But it's interesting that they didn't invite everyone to come. I mean, why would you not? I guess maybe it was for ration reasons, like with the like gasoline rations and stuff, that people wouldn't be able to make it there, and so they're like, well, if we invite people to come, then they'll do their best to use all their rations to do it, and maybe it's better if we just don't invite them to come, because then they'll save their rations for something else. Was that the logic? I don't know. Like, I know it's a little bit of a tangent, it's not really relevant, but like, that's interesting to me. But they were definitely held. I'm 100% sure that they were held. He was ordained and set apart by Heber J. Grant on October 7th. His first address as an apostle gives us an indication of the spirit in which he took up his ministry. He began by saying, "My beloved brethren of the priesthood, my heart is filled to overflowing with gratitude as I look into your faces this day, a day which I shall never forget. I am grateful beyond any power of expression for the blessings which have come to me, and particularly for the great honor that has come to one of the weakest of your number. I love this work. All my life I have had a testimony of it, and a love for the leaders of the church and for the priesthood of God. I know that it is true, and no sacrifice that you and I can make is too great for this wonderful work in which we are engaged. With the farewell blessings of Mr. Teague and the Executive Committee of the National Council of Farmer Cooperatives, Elder Benson severed his connection with that organization the following May, and was presented with a framed scroll which referred to him as a man without peer in his field of activities. That's really nice. He gave him the lovely going-away present. A few months after the end of World War II, Elder Benson was chosen to restore contacts with the saints in Europe as president of the European Mission. His task was to organize the shipments of clothing, food, and bedding for the saints in Europe, to reorganize the missions, to prepare the way for new missionaries from the United States, and to restore the bridge of spirituality between the old world and the new. That's cool. Elder Benson arrived in London on February 4th, 1946, only 3 weeks after his appointment had been announced. Okay, wow, so he didn't waste any time, yeah? On the following Sunday, he held a conference at the joint branches of the London district. On Monday, he flew to Paris to purchase vehicles for the distribution of food and supplies. So, he's a go-getter, yeah? He's like, we got a job to do, let's do it, yeah? During the next 2 weeks, Elder Benson also visited the Netherlands, Danish, Swedish, and Norwegian missions, often changing trains several times in the course of a day, and taking to army trucks to get across rivers where railway bridges had been bombed out. Why did they say he changed trains? Of course you change trains. You're going to various different countries. It happens. Like, there's very few train routes that would take you directly there. Yeah? I changed trains several times a day. Yeah. Did you know I recently went to Paris, and to get back where I live in Europe, it's not in France, but I live in a neighboring country. And I had to change 3 times. You know, it happens. I don't know. It's just a little strange. But I guess their point is that the infrastructure had been damaged to the point that they had to keep moving around things. Yeah, so it's like taking to army trucks to get across rivers where railway bridges had been bombed out. Okay, yeah. Elder Benson conferred with dozens of church and civil leaders, arranged for the distribution of food, and surveyed the spiritual conditions of the missions and branches. In March, he began another tour, this time holding many conferences. Okay, so the first one was just to look around, yeah? And the second one was then, to assess needs, I mean, look around. That's basically what he did, but still. Assessing needs, and then the second one was about him giving conferences and encouraging the people. Before entering Germany, Elder Benson had wondered what kind of a reception he would have. The answer to his anxiety came at Karlsruhe, where a group of saints prolonged their meeting in a partly bombed-out building for 2 hours, waiting for him to arrive. Wow. They just hung out for 2 hours. That's admirable. When the happy reunion finally took place, almost the entire audience was in tears, as this was the first time in 6 or 7 years that they had had an opportunity to greet a representative from church headquarters. Yeah, that makes sense. War was long, yeah. They insisted that the meeting be extended, and that at the conclusion everyone should have an opportunity to shake the apostle's hand before leaving. Yeah. Permission to enter Germany had been most difficult to obtain. The occupying military authorities had laid down a rule against the admittance of anyone not connected with, continued on page 282. The government, yeah. Elder Benson sought an appointment with the general in charge and was flatly refused. The plight of the people was so desperate that he refused to take no for an answer. He turned to the Lord for help through fasting and prayer. Before long, he tells us, a spirit of assurance replaced my troubled anxiety. The Lord, I thought, is sharing his strength with me. An impelling force urged me to seek another audience with the general. I approached the general's adjutant with a new surge of confidence. Minutes later, I was granted an audience. The general heard me through and graciously acceded to our request. That's awesome! Divine assistance was also necessary to get him into Poland. In Finland, Elder Benson... See, they didn't mention Poland. Tell me about Poland, you know? In Finland, Elder Benson selected an appropriate spot and dedicated that land to the preaching of the gospel. Really? so there's an asterisk. This was a rededication of that land. Elder Francis M. Lyman of the Council of the 12, then serving as president of the European Mission, dedicated Finland in August 1903. See the Improvement Era 6, Volume 6, page 923? Is that what it says? It's a little blurry there. Meanwhile, in Salt Lake City, Sister Benson continued, as usual, to take the major responsibility in rearing the family. Although she missed him greatly, her plucky spirit and desire to have him share his time in service with others was a real inspiration to many who realized that already his church and business travels had taken him away from home about half of their married life. When he returned home at the end of 10 months, he had covered 61,236 miles, had borne his testimony in 13 European countries, spread comfort and encouragement among thousands of grief-stricken, impoverished, and war-sickened people, distributed 51 carloads of food and other supplies, reorganized branches, purchased properties, and prepared the way for a great new missionary effort among peoples touched by the tragedy of war. Wow, that's a lot, yeah? Back home again, Elder Benson plunged into a seemingly endless round of activities. On November 16, 1952, he accompanied President Stephen L. Richards of the First Presidency to Washington for the dedication of the Chevy Chase Ward Chapel. He visited a number of government officials and farm leaders. In 1948, he had been approached before the presidential election in regard to a position in the cabinet that Governor Thomas E. Dewey hoped to organize. In 1950, Thomas E. Dewey, he didn't become president. Interesting. In 1952, Elder Benson had no thought of being singled out to head the Department of Agriculture. On the night of November 20th, however, Elder Benson received a telephone call that a great groundswell of support was developing for his appointment to be Secretary of Agriculture, and he truthfully replied that he had heard nothing about it. What would be the attitude of the church, he was asked. There's only one man who can answer that, Elder Benson replied, and that's the president of the church. My life is dedicated to this work, but I'd be glad to try and do anything the president of the church asked me to do. Early the next morning, Elder Benson encountered President McKay. I received a very important telephone call last night, President McKay said. Brother Benson, my mind is clear in the matter, and if the opportunity comes in the proper manner, I think you should accept. President McKay, was the reply. I can't believe that it will come. At Provo the next day, with Elder Marky Peterson, Elder Benson was assisting in the division of the Sharon steak when he received a message from the Eisenhower headquarters. Before returning the call, he isolated himself in an office at Brigham Young University and telephoned to President McKay. The call was a request that he go to New York for an interview with the president-elect, whom he had never met. He left by plane that night. Wow. Can you imagine? I didn't know that that's how that worked. I guess maybe in the 50s, but I don't know if it still works that way, but that's crazy. Elder Benson had never had any yearning to get into politics, though he was deeply interested in good government and the election of men of integrity and good judgment to office. His preference was to devote his own time and talents to the church. I don't want to be Secretary of Agriculture, he told his friends before leaving for New York. I can't imagine anyone in his right mind wanting it. He was thinking of the pressures, the controversies, and the difficulties that position would inevitably entail. The president-elect greeted his visitor warmly, and it was soon evident that the general had made up his mind. In response to his offer, Elder Benson, speaking with the utmost candor, cited several reasons why he shouldn't become a member of the cabinet. First, he said he had been a supporter of his distant cousin, Senator Taft. Oh, really? Distant cousin. Yeah, that makes sense. Ezra Taft Benson, yeah? And then he had always thought it would be a little better, other things being equal, not to have a military man in the White House. The president-elect indicated that all perfectly all right. That's so funny. Elder Benson also mentioned that the president-elect might be expected to select a Secretary of Agriculture from the Great Farm Belt. When the president commented that Elder Benson seemed to have the confidence of rural people to an unusual degree, Elder Benson replied that he thought that he did have their confidence and that he'd rather have that confidence than be secretary, and he wasn't sure that a man could be secretary and keep that confidence too. Wow, so he was very self-aware that this would be divisive, yeah? And finally, Elder Benson said, I wonder about the wisdom of calling a clergyman, a minister of the gospel, to be Secretary of Agriculture. What will be the reaction from other religious groups, or from people generally? Suppose, General Eisenhower replied in substance, we consider the last question first. Surely you believe that the job to be done is spiritual. Surely you know that we have a great responsibility to restore confidence in the minds of our people in their own government, that we have to deal with spiritual matters. When the president-elect had effectively disposed of the objections that Elder Benson had raised, he added, we've got a great job to do. I don't want to be president, frankly, when the pressure started. But you can't refuse to serve America. We've got a great job to do, and I want you on my team. Wow, that's so crazy. The president-elect's urging that he accept a top responsibility to serve America could not be denied. As he had foreseen, at least in some measure, controversy began to swirl about Secretary Benson's head even before his confirmation. Though his nomination was promptly confirmed, many began to criticize him for his stand against the increase of regimentation and control of agriculture. Secretary Benson inherited an appalling farm problem. I'm not surprised. Before he took office in January 1953, farm income had undergone a drastic shrinkage under rigid wartime price support laws. That's what I was thinking. It was because of war, Once in office, he found he was bound to administer this law, under which the decline had occurred until the 1955 harvest. Immediately, Secretary Benson began the most extensive review of the farm problem ever conducted. The results of the study became the basis for the new Eisenhower farm policy sent to the Congress in 1954, which began to take effect in the 1955 crops. These recommendations geared production for use rather than for storage. It called for flexible price supports ranging from 75 to 90% of parity, and adjustments for each major crop in accord with the supply and demand situation at the beginning of each crop year. Okay, I don't know anything about this, so I'm kind of skimming over this. It was a realistic and at the same time a moderate retreat from the subsidization of unusable surpluses, and it won the support of the largest and most influential farm organizations. With many congressmen from agricultural states, however, it proved to be very unpopular. Really? Why? Oh, the congressmen didn't like it. Okay, I was thinking that the farmers didn't like it. The House Agriculture Committee voted against flexible price supports by an overwhelming majority of 21 to 8. In the Senate Committee, 9 out of 15 votes went against the chief provision of the Eisenhower-Benson proposal. It looked as if the drive for common sense in agriculture would go down to inevitable defeat, and there was talk of an early departure from Washington for Secretary Benson. Really? Without any loss of confidence, the Secretary kept up a constant fight for the course he believed to be right. His courage and logic proved to be contagious. Congress finally overturned the work of its committees on agriculture and passed the bill in a form that was quite acceptable to the President and the Secretary. Soon it became apparent that the new law could not operate effectively because of the huge price-depressing surpluses accumulated under the recent rigid wartime supports. The Department of Agriculture estimated that these surpluses overhanging the market reduced the farm income by $2 billion during 1955. Other measures giving more direct and immediate relief to the farmers would have been taken if the farmer were to regain his relative standing in the national economy. Once more, Secretary Benson launched a broad review of alternatives. When his advisory group made their recommendations, he studied them carefully, adopting some and modifying or discarding others, until a supplementary program had taken shape. It was recommended to the Congress by the President on January 6, 1956. This 1956 program is a logical extension of the earlier policy. Featuring the so-called soil bank, it recognizes that the farmer is entitled to additional help while he is waiting for production to level off or consumption to increase and surpluses to be reduced. One phase of the new plan would offer him payments for putting into an acreage reserve part of this land customarily planted in such crops as corn, rice, wheat, and cotton. Another phase would result in long-range contracts between the government and farm workers for carrying out soil conservation practices and for use of land for timber or grass or other protective vegetative cover. The Secretary has met each problem that has arisen with resourcefulness, respect for facts, and a basic understanding of agriculture and of people. In order to keep closely in touch with farmers and their problems, he has traveled about 250,000 miles and made hundreds of speeches. He never forgets that in the last analysis he is dealing with men and women. God's children. Sometimes he has been accused by his critics of showing more concern for the spiritual welfare of farm people than for improvement of their income. Actually, of course, the two aims are not exclusive. Yeah, that's true. The truth is that while working indefatigably for the temporal welfare of farm people, he has also encouraged the development of qualities that make for a richer life. On one occasion, he declared that there is little wrong with farmers that the rest of us that integrity, moral courage, and spirituality won't cure. Though nearly all of his time is given in his official duties, he continues to live his religion and attend the general conferences of the church, and to establish contacts with church groups on his travels. As the first member of the church to hold a position in the cabinet, he and his wife and family have attracted widespread attention to the standards and teachings of the church. Yeah, that's embarrassing. Secretary Benson is the first clergyman to serve in the cabinet in 100 years. He has been widely recognized for his meritorious service and leadership ability. Numerous citations and special recognitions have come to him, including 7 honorary doctorate degrees. Wow! Okay, I really flew through that because I just found that it was a little too technical for me. Yeah, and we're not done yet. Okay. Taking a deep breath. We will get through this. I told you it was a long article. So, the Benson family has been widely publicized and honored for its practices and achievements that are rooted in the gospel. The articles in national magazines and newspapers, plus national TV and radio programs featuring the Bensons' cooperative plan of family management, their home nights, their sense of cohesiveness, and their devotion to high ideals are too numerous to mention. On one occasion, the Benson family gave a demonstration of their home night for President and Mrs. Eisenhower. On another occasion, Sister Benson and her daughters have entertained the First Lady and the wives of cabinet members in the wholesome atmosphere of a Mormon home. Sister Benson was honored as the Outstanding Homemaker of the Year in 1955. That's sweet, by the National Home Fashions League. She has served in executive and teaching positions in ward, stake, and mission capacities wherever they have lived. Her tested counsel is frequently sought on matters of homemaking and child training. Washington has not disturbed the fine relationships of the Benson home. On one occasion, when the secretary was invited to an important dinner, he responded, "Sorry, I have a date with my daughter Bonnie." It was a father-daughter party in the Washington ward at which the daughters served their fathers and then took them on a scavenger hunt. That's cute. The secretary seemed to enjoy ringing doorbells in the neighborhood with 14-year-old Bonnie. They were fleet enough to win first prize. Of course they were. The Bensons' home nights are a source of much enjoyment as well as religious training. After the opening song and prayer and scripture reading, there may be a discussion of family problems. Then the parents and children may gather around the piano to sing, or they may put on some records for dancing. Sister Benson has been quoted as saying that we often dance away our troubles, but many who know the family are more impressed by the way in which she organizes and manages home and family. Although she is gentle and soft-spoken, she pursues her aims with great tenacity and endurance. In hours of trial and discouragement, she has sustained Elder Benson, and in moments of triumph and elation, she has maintained a womanly sense of proportion. Prayer in the home and a spirit of cooperation keeps troubles from arising. The home nights serve also as a means of settling family problems. All the children participate in the discussions of the questions as the color of the car the family is about to buy, what they should watch on television, and how the household duties should be divided. When all the arguments have been presented, a vote is taken in the most democratic fashion, which means that the youthful point of view often prevails. Yeah, there's more kids than adults, yeah. Such a vote results in the purchase of a red car, despite the secretary's preference for black. That's cute that they give them a voice in it, though. The children have all excelled in church, school, and civic activities. Reed, 28, a former Air Force chaplain and now Washington State Commission president, is working for the Republican National Committee, delivering talks across the country and assisting his father in congressional political matters. Okay, so that's the oldest, yeah? Mark, 27, who married Leela Wing, has 2 children. With a master's degree from Stanford University, he is in business in Salt Lake City and serving in positions of leadership in the church. Both sons have filled missions for the church and served as district presidents. Okay, I really like this. I like that they're listing the kids. Barbara, 21, married Dr. Robert Harris Walker and lives in Calgary, Alberta, Canada. Beverly, 18, is a student at BYU. Bonnie, 16, attends Roosevelt High School in Washington. and Flora Beth, 11, is in elementary school. Distance has changed means of communication, but has not weakened their feeling of family solidarity. That is 6. Okay, that answers that question. 6 children, not 7. I miscounted. So, there you go, 6 children. It is no secret that Elder Benson has found much of his strength, his determination, and his inspiration in his home. Throughout his career, Elder Benson has demonstrated a high degree of spiritual mindedness, courage, and strength of character in 3 spheres of activity: religion, family life, and agriculture. The influences that have been dominant in his life are his pioneer Mormon heritage, his childhood in an ideal Christian farm home, his service in the church, and the inspiration of a wife companion of exceptional talents, faithfulness, and devotion. A deeply religious man, he adheres to his principles without compromise, regardless of what the circumstances may be. In Washington, his superb moral courage is as well known as it is in Salt Lake City. At the same time, he is a man of warm human understanding, with fine tolerance for other people's religious convictions. His philosophy of life stems from the gospel and the United States Constitution. It is my firm belief, he often says, that the God of heaven raised up the founding fathers and inspired them to establish the Constitution of this land. He regards freedom as a God-given eternal principle, a heritage more precious than life itself. But he believes that free men can attain their greatest potential only through initiative, self-reliance, cooperation, hard work, and prayer, that our Republican form of government has its roots deep in the soil, and that the end of all government is to be the servant, not the master of the people. While he has been struggling to improve the lot of the farmer, Elder Benson has conveyed to millions of people a new sense of values. He has demonstrated in his own life the supreme practicality of Christ's teachings. Long after his work of Secretary of Agriculture has been finished, he will be recognized as an exemplar of a way of life that holds within itself the key to solution of the world's problems. That was a really long article. I don't feel the need to do a lot of fact checking, okay? Obviously, we missed several years. However, I think that we will be able to skim through the Wikipedia article to only just fill in the gaps. That was a very, complete article. I feel like there wasn't a lot of gaps in it for 1956. The gap is after that. Yeah, 1956 until his death in, what was that, I don't even know, 1990 something. Anyways, okay, so let's take a look at the Wikipedia article, and I'm going to do some serious skimming. We are skipping most of it, okay? I only want to look at what is new, yeah. So Ezra Taft Benson, August 4th, 1899 to May 30th, 1994, was an American farmer, government official, and religious leader who served as the 15th United States Secretary of Agriculture during both presidential terms of Dwight D. Eisenhower and as the 13th president of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, LDS Church, from 1985 until his death in 1994. It's interesting to me that they list Secretary of Agriculture first of his, things that he did. All right. Early life I am completely skipping because I think that we got enough of that, yeah? And being called to... Yeah, he was called at the same time as Spencer W. Kimball. I thought he was. In 1943. All right, I'm going to go ahead and read this. It looks like there's a few details that we didn't have before, so... All right, Apostle. In 1943, Benson went to Salt Lake City to ask the church leaders for advice on whether to accept a new job. They unexpectedly told him that he would join the church leadership. On October 7th, 1943, both Benson and Spencer W. Kimball became members of the church's Quorum of the 12 Apostles, filling 2 vacancies created by deaths of apostles that summer. Since Kimball was 4 years older than Benson, Kimball was ordained first and was given seniority over Benson in the Quorum. That's usually how it works. He became president of the Quorum in 1973 when Kimball became president of the church. Yeah. In 1946, the first presidency sent Benson to Europe to oversee the church relief efforts after World War II. He spent 11 months there, traveling 61,000 miles and supervising 2,000 tons of relief supplies, including to Germany and Poland. I don't know why they separately listed that, but okay. Recalling this experience, he wrote to his wife, "I am so grateful you and the children can be spared the views of the terrible ravages of war. I fear I'll never be able to erase them from my memory." Wow. He had a little PTSD from it, sounds like. Huh. Apostle Gordon B. Hinckley noted of Benson's experience in Europe, "I am confident that it was out of what he saw of the bitter fruit of dictatorship that he developed his strong feelings, almost hatred, for communism and socialism." Okay, that makes sense. On April 25th, 1950, Benson was married vicariously to his never-married and recently deceased cousin, Eva Amanda Benson, with his wife standing in as proxy. That's a little weird. No offense. All right. On September 16th, 1980, he dedicated the newly renamed Ezra Taft Benson building at Ricks College. Benson's teaching as an apostle with a 2015 course of study. Okay. Political career. I'm going to skip most of this because I feel like we got enough. Yeah. Anti-communism efforts. That might be interesting because we didn't really talk about that yet. Benson was an outspoken opponent of communism and socialism and a strong supporter, but not an official member, of the JBS. What is the JBS? Which he praised as the most effective non-church organization in our fight against creeping socialism and godless communism. What the flip is the JBS? Did they mention it earlier? John Birch Society made an... what is that? Okay. Is an American right-wing political advocacy group founded in 1958. It is an anti-communist, supports social conservatism, and associated with ultra-conservative, radical right, far-right, right-wing populist, and right-wing libertarian ideas. That sounds a touch on the dangerous side, I'm not going to lie. And a strong supporter, but not an official member of the JBS, which is why I don't agree with him politically, which he praised as the most effective non-church organization in our fight against creeping communism and socialism and godless communism. Benson requested permission of Church President McKay to join the JBS and sit on its board, but the request was denied. They were probably too extreme. Benson was a close friend of the JBS founder, Robert W. Welch Jr., exchanging dozens of letters and many hours in person discussing politics. When Nikita Khrushchev came in September 1959 to the U.S., Benson opposed his visit. From the 1950s to the 1980s, his public support of anti-communism often put him at odds with other leaders of the LDS Church. Yeah, I'm not surprised, because most people aren't as extreme as you. I told you, I don't agree with him politically. I have issues with this. In 1960, Benson made a proposition to Brigham Young University President Ernest L. Wilkinson that his son, Reed Benson, be used as a spy to find out who the Orthodox teachers were and report to his father. What? No, you don't do this. Wilkinson declined the offer, thank God, stating neither Brother Lee nor I want espionage of that character. Good. Later in the 1960s and 1970s, members and advocates of the Birch Society did conduct espionage at BYU. Yeah, but then he wasn't involved, or at least his son wasn't involved, at least. Gosh. In an October 1961 General Conference, Benson said, "No true Latter-day Saint and no true American can be a socialist or a communist or support programs leading in that direction." Yeah, I remember reading this. I remember reading that. Okay, so for a while, I was reading some old General Conferences aloud just for myself. I ended up losing a hard drive, so I don't have them anymore, which is really sad because I really enjoyed it. It was something that I really liked doing, but I just don't have them anymore. But yeah, I think that was one of the ones that I had read. And I was like, wow, sheesh. This and similar statements by Benson in the December Church News led Hugh B. Brown, a politically liberal member of the church's first presidency, to begin publicly and privately pushing back against Benson. Yeah. In the April 1962 General Conference, Brown said, "The degree of a man's aversion to communism may not always be measured by the noise he makes in going about and calling everyone a communist who disagrees with his personal political bias. There is no excuse for members of this church, especially men who hold the priesthood, to be opposing one another over communism." Oh, good for him. Thank you, Hugh B. Brown. Hugh B. Brown saves the day. Thank you very much. Gosh, see, I told you I have issues with him politically. Okay, this is what I meant. In October 1962, Benson formally endorsed the JBS as his son Reed accepted a leadership role in the society. Of course he did. Gosh, Reed Benson had been using LDS church meeting houses for JBS meetings, a move that angered both Brown and first counselor Henry D. Moyle, who believed it violated the LDS church's policy of political neutrality. Yeah, amen to that. Brown wrote in a letter shortly after the endorsement that he was disgusted, and if Ezra Taft Benson continued his JBS activities, that some disciplinary action should be taken. In January 1963, the First Presidency issued a statement. We deplore the presumption of some politicians, especially officers, coordinators, and members of the John Birch Society who undertake to align the church or its leadership with their political views. Good. That's an official statement by the First Presidency. Wow. 3 days later, Benson spoke at a JBS-endorsed political rally, reported by several newspapers as purposefully ignoring the First Presidency statement and embarrassing to the LDS Church. Yeah, I kind of agree. In February 1963, the JBS asked its members to write to President McKay with the suggested verbiage to praise the great service Ezra Taft Benson and his son Reed, our Utah coordinator, are rendering to this battle with the hope that they will be encouraged to continue. That same month, Benson gave a copy of his book, The Red Carpet, a forthright evaluation of the rising tide of socialism, the royal road to communism, to newly called apostle N. Eldon Tanner, who was a Democrat and had been a Canadian politician in the Alberta Social Credit Party. Yeah, I talked about him recently. In 1963, the First Presidency sent Benson to Europe to preside over the missionary work there. Some, including the New York Times, interpreted this move as an exile after Benson's virtual endorsement of the JBS in General Conference. We're going to exile him to Europe because he can't stop being politically active in the U.S. McKay publicly denied that the assignment was an exile or a rebuke, but other church leaders, including Joseph Fielding Smith, indicated that a purpose in sending Benson to Europe was to break his ties with the JBS. Yeah, okay. Dude, take a hint. At this point, you are being reprimanded. Just accept it. Benson published a 1966 pamphlet entitled Civil Rights, Tool of Communist Deception. Of course he did. In a similar vein, during a 1972 General Conference, Benson recommended that all church members read Gary Allen's New World Order tract, None Dare Call It a Conspiracy. U.S. Representative Ralph R. Harding, during a speech in Congress, accused Benson of being a spokesperson for the radical right and using his apostleship to give the impression that the church approved of the JBS. Eisenhower endorsed Harding's criticism of Benson. Whoa! President Eisenhower turned against him about it. He's like, dude, you're becoming an extremist. Please stop. Gosh. Civil rights movement. Oh gosh, I don't know if I want to hear this. All right, Benson viewed the civil rights movement as having been infiltrated with communists who were using the movement to steer the United States toward communist policies. In his October 1967 conference address, Benson summed up his oft-repeated views. Now, there is nothing wrong with civil rights. It's what's being done in the name of civil rights that is alarming. There is no doubt the so-called civil rights movement as it exists today is used as a communist program for revolution in America, just as agrarian reform was used by the communists to take over China and Cuba. Yeah, no. No. Communism was not behind the civil rights movement. Weird that they thought that. That he thought that. Not everybody thought that. That this person thought that. Okay. In 1967, Benson asked McKay for permission to speak on how the communists are using the Negroes to foment trouble in the United States. I hate that wording. While McKay allowed Benson to speak on the subject, other church apostles were opposed to Benson's positions. McKay did occasionally take action to limit Benson's use of the church to promote the JBS, such as when he deleted a couple of paragraphs from Benson's 1965 conference address after a complaint from Brown. Oh my gosh, I wonder how often that happens. How often are your conference talks edited by the president of the church? Ooh. When Joseph Fielding Smith became church president in 1970, Benson was no longer given permission to promote his political opinions. Wow! I didn't realize that could be revoked. Oh my gosh. Wow. Also in 1967, Benson gave a talk discussing his views on the civil rights movement at the anti-communist segregationist leadership school of Billy James Hargis, who published it in his Christian Crusade magazine. Benson approved this talk to be used as the foreword to the book The Black Hammer, a study of black power, red influence, and white alternatives, which the Southern Poverty Law Center has classified as racist. Yeah, you think? Jeez. This book features a decapitated and bleeding African American head being used at the end of a hammer in the communist hammer and sickle, illustrating the book's theme that the civil rights movement was being used as a tool by communists. That's disgusting. Historian D. Michael Quinn speculates that the endorsement of this book by Benson may have been an attempt to curry favor with segregationist George Wallace, who several months later asked Benson to be his vice presidential running mate for his 1968 campaign. He ran for vice president? Did he actually? Wow. I didn't know he was that close to that. That is extraordinarily disappointing. Oh gosh. So I'm looking at a picture of the cover of the Black Hammer with what they were describing. That's really bad. That's horrible. Oh my gosh. I didn't realize he had become an absolute extremist. I did know that I did not agree with his political opinions, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they were necessarily bad. It just means that we disagreed politically, but, like, this is bad. Like, this is genuinely bad. That's the end of that section, and so I'm hoping that that was the worst of it. Like, so far, the article was really positive and really showed him as a person trying to do his best. And now it's just, wow. That's some extremism that I cannot endorse. All right, deep breaths. Church presidency. Benson succeeded Kimball as president of the Quorum of the 12 Apostles in 1973 and as church president in 1985. Benson retained Gordon B. Hinckley, who had been Kimball's second counselor, as his first counselor, and chose Thomas S. Monson as his second counselor. Despite speculation, Benson did not discuss politics during his tenure as president, thank goodness, and instead focused on spiritual messages. During his early years as church president, Benson brought a renewed emphasis to the distribution and reading of the Book of Mormon. Yeah, I remember that. Reaffirming this LDS scripture's importance as the keystone of the LDS religion. After his challenge to the membership to flood the earth with the Book of Mormon, the church sold a record 6 million copies that year to its membership for redistribution. He is also remembered for a general conference sermon condemning pride. Oh yeah, I remember that. Which relied heavily upon C.S. Lewis's Mere Christianity. In the priesthood session of the church's 1988 General Conference, Benson specifically addressed the single adult men of the church, encouraging them to examine their direction in life and align themselves with the priorities of Christian discipleship, including marriage and family responsibilities. Okay. I don't think there's anything wrong with that, like encouraging young men to, move on with their life, basically. Scouting. Benson was a lifelong supporter of scouting. He started in 1918 as assistant scoutmaster. On May 23, 1949, he was elected member of the National Executive Board of the Boy Scouts of America. He received the 3 highest national awards in the Boy Scouts of America: the Silver Beaver, the Silver Antelope, and the Silver Buffalo, as well as World Scouting International Award, the Bronze Wolf. Okay. I don't know anything about scouting, so okay. I'll just say okay. Health problems and death. Benson suffered poor health in the last years of his life due to blood clots in the brain. Strokes. That's strokes. Why don't they just say strokes? By the time he became president of the church, he was suffering some effects incident with old age, including dizzy spells, memory loss, and difficulty in public speaking. In late 1987, he suffered a minor heart attack, and in late 1988, shortly after what would be the last church general conference where he would speak, really? His last talk was in 1988? He didn't die until 1994. Wow. He suffered a stroke, which limited his ability to communicate. Oh. He probably couldn't walk either because of, it tends to be like a right, left side. Yeah, it's only one side of your body gets paralyzed. I wonder if that happened to him. Starting around May 1989, Benson's capacity to conduct administrative and other business was severely diminished by illness and age, and his two counselors, Hinckley and Monson, took over the church administrative duties. Yeah, in fact, that's my opinion why President Hinckley called President Monson as his first counselor. I think it was because they'd worked together so long. They're like, hey, it's just business as usual, Around this time, Benson's grandson, Steve Benson, accused church leaders of hiding the extent of Benson's senility and deterioration. Benson was hospitalized in 1993 with pneumonia. Okay, I'm going to finish this up and then come back to that. Benson died on May 30th, 1994 of congestive heart failure in his Salt Lake City apartment at age 94. Funeral services were held June 4th, 1994 in Salt Lake Tabernacle and were conducted by Hinckley. Benson was buried near his birthplace in Whitney, Idaho at the Whitney City Cemetery. Following Benson's funeral, Howard W. Hunter succeeded him as church president. Okay. We'll look at his public works in a moment, but I want to come back to this idea of hiding the extent of his senility. I don't think they hid it necessarily, as just kept it private. I don't know that it's necessarily anyone's business. However, except for the leaders of the church. That means that President Hinckley and President Monson were leading the church at the time. They took over. I mean, they didn't make a secret of that, and that's why I don't really feel like it was so much a secret as it was just business as usual. They didn't make any major changes in that time. They just kind of kept things going, yeah? If there had been major changes at the time, then I would say, yeah, maybe they are hiding President Benson's senility and deterioration to a certain extent. But since they didn't really make any major changes, I feel like they were just keeping things going. They weren't hiding it. They never said that they were able to go to President Benson and have him lead things. Although I know that President Hinckley did make an effort to do that, but he also recognized the limits of President Benson at that time. Like, he wasn't able to lead in a way that made sense. So President Hinckley just kind of took over. And it wasn't that he wanted to be president of the church, and he didn't at the time because he wasn't president of the church, and he was trying to be respectful of President Benson's authority. But he couldn't go to him and ask questions, really. So he just kind of tried to keep the status quo for as long as was necessary. And he did. And I think that's admirable. I don't think that they were necessarily hiding his senility. I think that they just kept it private in a respectful way and tried to lead the church without making changes. Yeah? That's what I think. That's my opinion. You can have a different opinion. Feel free to have a different opinion. Leave a comment below if you have a different opinion, or if you have the same opinion, whatever your opinion is. I like opinions. Okay. Published works. Whew. Read A. Benson, So Shall Ye Reap, Selected Addresses of Ezra Taft Benson. The Red Carpet, never heard of it. The Title of Liberty. Okay. Wes Andrews and Clyde Dalton, The Black Hammer, A Study of Black Power, Red Influence of White Alternatives. Yeah, that sounds terrible. Foreword by Ezra Taft Benson. That's crazy. An Enemy Hath Done This. Civil Rights, Tool of Communist Deception. God, Family, Country, Our Three Great Loyalties. Crossfire, The 8 Years with Eisenhower. Okay, a little bit of autobiographical, yeah. This Nation Shall Endure. Come Unto Christ. The Constitution, A Heavenly Banner. The Teachings of Ezra Taft Benson. A Witness and a Warning. Oh, I've heard of this one. A Modern Day Prophet Testifies of the Book of Mormon. Yeah, I think I've read that one, in fact. Or if I didn't, I read part of it, yeah. Ezra Taft Benson Remembers the Joys of Christmas. That's kind of cute. A Labor of Love. The 1946 European Mission of Ezra Taft Benson. That sounds biographical and not so much written by him, yeah. Come Listen to a Prophet's Voice. Missionaries to Match Our Message. Elect Women of God. Sermons and Writings of President Ezra Taft Benson. Teachings of Presidents of the Church, Ezra Taft Benson. Okay. It sounds like those ones that were published in the 90s or even in the late 80s were less from him as were written by people about him. Yes? Because, for example, Come Listen to a Prophet's Voice, unless he had written that before he became so senile that he was unable to, formulate a cohesive thought, that it doesn't really sound like it was possible for him to have written in 1990. I'm wondering either he had written it beforehand or it was written for him by writings that he had done in the past. I'm not sure which one, but that's what it sounds like to me. I could be wrong. Posthumous honors. Idaho Hall of Fame inducted in 1997. Ezra Taft Benson Building, Brigham Young University, dedicated by Gordon B. Hinckley, 1995. See also Michael T. Benson, Steve Benson, and Mark B. Madsen. There's grandchildren. Okay. That was really long, and it was really a lot. I must say I am disappointed to learn that he was quite an extremist in his political views. I did know he was very conservative, which I am not, which is why I knew that we don't agree politically. But I was not really prepared to learn that he was an extremist. And that I find that very disappointing. I must say, to be perfectly honest, I find it very surprising that he voted so readily for the expansion of the priesthood authority to be granted to black members of the church. Because that happened in 1978, and we read last week that was unanimous. That was unanimous from all of the 12 and the first presidency. And because it was unanimous, I can confidently say that he voted for it. But I find it very surprising that he did, based on his attitudes about race in general. So, what do you think? Like, I find it very confusing. Like, I'm not sure how all the things we just learned about him come together into one person. Like, how is it possible that he hadn't sought his political position, and yet later on he nearly ran for vice president? Yeah? Like, does that even come together? Did he decide that he did like politics? I'm very confused. And I feel like his attitudes about things were very divisive and very oppositional, yeah? Like, you have, like, the two different sides to him. Which side is it that is really the one, like, that's the true Ezra Taft Benson? Was it the side of trying to support the farmers and trying to make better lives for his family and for his children and for everyone around him? Or is it the side of being so paranoid about communism that you're ready to, like, set up spies at BYU to make sure that so, like, it's on one side you're supporting people and being able to live their lives to the best, highest quality, whatever. And on the other side, you have this side of you saying, we need to control everyone in this world to think like we do. Like, those don't really seem to go together, in my opinion. People who love people and want people to have, like, good lives also tend to want them to have the ability to choose for themselves, to make their own decisions. They don't want to be forced into doing things. And you seeing the side of, like, a right-wing extremist dictator in Europe making these really terrible, like, things happen. How in the world can you then come back to the United States and say, I am now a right-wing extremist? Like, dude, basically what you're saying is if you had lived in Germany at the time, you would have been on Hitler's side. How can you say that? Like, I get that it's against a different ideology and whatever, but, like, if you say that you're so anti-communist, that you're pro-fascist. Like, that's basically what you're saying with this JBS crap. And it's really horrifying, in my opinion. It's horrifying. And that's my biggest issue with Ezra Taft Benson, and why I was kind of dreading making this video. I knew that this would happen. Not to this extent, but I did know that this would happen to a certain extent. And it's absolutely horrifying to me to think that someone who was so pro the people and pro-democracy can then go so far into their anti-communist rabbit hole that they come out on the fascist side. Like, that's just... It's very sad to me. And I am really glad that he didn't bring politics into his leadership of the church. Or not as much as people were expecting anyway. But that is the reason why Ezra Taft Benson is not and never will be my favorite president of the church. He was president of the church. He's the first one I remember my parents talking about. I remember them talking about Spencer W. Kimball in a past tense, but Ezra Taft Benson in a present tense. But I don't remember him specifically having given talks. So, he was a tiny bit before my time because I was a small child. However, I do know that he had a huge influence on the membership of the church, and in my opinion is why a lot of the present day membership of the church is very conservative. That is my opinion. I could be wrong, obviously. You don't have to share my opinion, but what do you think? Leave a comment below. And am I misinterpreting anything, or is that also how you see this? Once again, what I am saying is my opinion. I am not saying that it is the right opinion. I am not saying that everyone should agree with my opinion. But that is my opinion in these videos. I share my opinions, and that is my right as an individual. If you disagree with me, I am more than happy to have you write your opinions down below. Just keep it respectful, okay? There's no reason... I've gotten some comments recently of people being like, you don't know what you're talking about because... You don't need to say that. I have an opinion, and so do you. That doesn't mean that I don't know what I'm talking about. That just means that you do not share my opinion, and that's fine. But please be respectful. Be respectful of me. Be respectful of each other in the comments. Thank you. If you liked the video, please give it a like and subscribe to the channel, and I hope to see you in the next video.